Tonight, face-off with Putin, a chilly showdown over Assad's chemical attack, U.S. strikes in Syria, and Russia's interference in our election. Secretary Tillerson's blunt message in Moscow as President Trump makes surprising reversals. Beating on tape, a police officer seen pummeling a man he stopped for jaywalking. Passers-by confronting the cop, the scene captured on camera. Cutting the fat, dramatic results just revealed after a big city banned trans fats, slashing the risk of heart attacks and strokes. And another big change coming to food nationwide. And Oprah's Passion Project, speaking to NBC News about her new movie, the untold story of a woman who has saved countless lives without even knowing it. Nightly News begins right now.
From NBC News World Headquarters in New York, this is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening. President Trump, who has been unwilling to publicly criticize Russia, today made a dramatic turnabout, declaring relations between the two countries to be at an all-time low. His comments coming hours after Secretary of State Rex Tillerson shared the same assessment following a high-stakes meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The friction is over what Russia may or may not have known about the recent deadly chemical weapons assault on civilians by its close ally Syria, and the U.S. wish to drive Syrian President Assad from power. Chief Foreign Affairs correspondent Andrea Mitchell has the latest from Moscow.
Secretary General.
President Trump tonight in a role reversal. Once talking up the possibility of warmer relations with Moscow, now the cold reality.
We may be at an all-time low in terms of relationship with Russia.
Secretary of State Rex Tillerson taking that message directly to Vladimir Putin during a 2-hour meeting tonight.
The world's two foremost nuclear powers cannot have this kind of relationship.
Tillerson, the highest-ranking Trump official to visit Moscow since Russia and its election hacking became a cloud over the campaign and the presidency. This visit turning into a tense showdown, much of it over Syria and that deadly chemical attack. Tillerson saying for the first time that the U.S. might consider war crimes charges against Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, one way to force Assad from office.
It is possible that the threshold necessary to charge individuals, including Bashar al-Assad, may be achieved.
The war of words over Syria starting early this morning. Putin rejecting White House intelligence that Assad launched the chemical attack and Russia was covering it up. Putin asking, where's the proof that the Syrian army used chemical weapons? There is none. While President Trump using his sharpest words yet about Assad.
That's a butcher. That's a butcher.
And leaving open the possibility that Russia, with soldiers on that Syrian airbase, may have known a chemical attack was about to be launched.
I would like to think that they didn't know, but certainly they could have. They were there, so we'll find out.
Overshadowing the U.S.-Putin relationship, the election year hacking. Tillerson says he brought it up with Putin.
We are mindful of the seriousness of that particular interference in our elections, and I'm sure that Russia is mindful of it as well.
A charge the Russian foreign minister quickly shot down.
I can only say once again that just as in the case with the so-called Russian hackers and the chemical incidents in Syria, we would very much like to get some concrete evidence, not just words.
And after hours of often testy talks, no progress on Tillerson's chief goal, getting Russia to back away from Assad.
The idea that Russia now is going to see the light about Mr. Assad and remove him is fanciful.
The Secretary of State was even lectured by the Russian foreign minister about Washington's conflicting messages on Syria and even why he hasn't filled so many State Department staff jobs, a sign that the U.S.-Russia relationship has a long way to go. Lester?
Andrea Mitchell in Moscow for us. Thank you, Andrea. And we want to bring in our chief foreign correspondent, Richard Engel, who is following all these developments from overseas. Richard, we've heard a lot of tough talk today, both sides, obvious disagreement. What do you make of it?
Well, there are some very real tensions, but is this the all-time lowest that relations between Moscow and the United States have been? Of course not. There is some posturing going on here. Let's not forget that the Trump administration is facing multiple investigations into potential collusion with the Kremlin. So that is part of the backdrop, and it very much suits President Trump and his close advisors to try and talk tough to Russia and create some distance between them and the Kremlin. Also, on the other side, Putin has his own domestic audience. If there's only one person in world affairs who may have a bigger ego than Trump, and it is Vladimir Putin. Putin is presenting himself as someone who can never lose, and he has definitely put his eggs in the basket of Bashar al-Assad. So even if Assad has become a liability to Moscow, and it's increasingly clear that Assad has become a liability, he can't back away because President Trump is telling him to back away from Assad.
Richard Engel with some perspective. Richard, thanks. In addition to his reversal on Russia, President Trump has made an abrupt about-face on a number of other foreign policy fronts. That includes his often expressed doubts about NATO and his vow to take economic action against China. We get more on that from NBC News White House correspondent Kristen Welker.
Tonight, President Trump making a number of stunning reversals as he faces multiple foreign policy crises after repeatedly calling NATO obsolete on the campaign trail.
NATO, in my opinion, is obsolete. Maybe NATO will dissolve, and that's okay.
Now, Mr. Trump changing his tone while standing next to NATO's Secretary General in the East Room.
I said it was obsolete. It's no longer obsolete.
The move aimed at getting NATO allies to ramp up their support in foreign fights and also pressing those countries to pay their fair share to support NATO's mission. But another striking reversal tonight after vowing to label China a currency manipulator as a candidate.
They are grand masters of currency manipulation.
Tonight, telling the Wall Street Journal they're not currency manipulators, explaining taking that step could jeopardize his talks with Beijing on confronting the threat of North Korea. The president wants China's help to press North Korea to back off its recent nuclear provocations. Analysts saying the shifting policies reflect a one-time candidate who is adjusting to serving in the nation's highest office.
Well, I think it's part of a learning process that the president is going through. There are things that one says on the campaign trail, and then you face the realities of the office.
Still, Mr. Trump is also ramping up his war of words with North Korea, making it clear the United States is prepared to go it alone if China doesn't get on board, a sentiment he conveyed during an unexpected call with China's president last night.
And I said, the way you're going to make a good trade deal is to help us with North Korea. Otherwise, we're just going to go it alone. That'll be all right, too. But going it alone means going it with lots of other nations.
This as the president faces foreign policy tests on multiple fronts.
Right now, the world is a mess. By the time I'm finished, it's going to be a lot better place to live in, because right now it's nasty.
And tonight, the White House is paying close attention to North Korea. Saturday marks the 105th anniversary of the birth of the country's founder. The isolated nation has used those types of anniversaries in the past to test its military might. Lester.
Kristen Welker at the White House. Thank you. Tonight, more fallout and more damage control from United Airlines, which now says it will reimburse every passenger who was on board that flight Sunday when security officers dragged a passenger from his seat to make room for crew members. Late today, we learned 2 more of those officers have been placed on administrative leave until further notice. And tonight, there are indications the passenger is preparing a lawsuit against the airline and airport. NBC's Tom Costello has the latest details.
Oh, my God.
This afternoon, Dr. David Dow, the man beaten and dragged from that United Airlines flight, filed an emergency court petition to preserve all video and voice recordings, crew and passenger manifests from Flight 3411, as United's CEO went on TV to formally apologize.
He was a paying passenger sitting on our seat in our aircraft, and no one should be treated that way.
Oscar Munoz says employees hadn't been given the tools to use common sense. On board Sunday's flight, teacher Jason Powell, who took his group of high schoolers off the plane after the incident.
It was really violent and disturbing. I was really particularly saddened by what happened. It was also somewhat embarrassing.
Like most airlines, United's 46-page passenger contract spells out why passengers can be bumped. In addition to being oversold or overbooked, passengers can be removed for failing to comply with crew instructions, failing to dress properly, even women who are 9 months pregnant. In Hawaii, United passenger Jeff Fern says he was told to get out of the first-class seat he'd paid for to make room for a higher priority passenger.
At that point, it was either comply or we'll summon security and physically evict you.
United says it happened after switching to a smaller aircraft, and it's sorry for Mr. Fern's entire travel experience. Most airlines overbook to ensure flights are full. Industry experts say United should have offered Sunday's customers more valuable travel vouchers, even gift cards, rather than call security. Meanwhile, with so few airlines, passengers have few alternatives if they are bumped. United Airlines says when it involuntarily bumps somebody, it does so based on their airfare, their frequent flyer status, and when they checked in. But now United Airlines has lost hundreds of millions of dollars in stock market valuation. Lester?
Tom Costello, thank you. Tonight, police in Sacramento have launched an investigation into one of their own officers after cell phone and dash cam video shows an officer roughing up a pedestrian stopped for jaywalking. Officials are calling the images disturbing. And NBC's Miguel Almaguer has the story.
Everybody, this is right here in the Del Paso Heights.
The confrontation turns violent in seconds. A Sacramento police officer slamming, then beating a pedestrian stopped for jaywalking.
Hey, why you beating him like that?
With the man pummeled by a flurry of punches, Sacramento PD calls this punishing beatdown disturbing and unacceptable.
No, that was wrong.
Launching a criminal investigation against one of their own.
I thought I was going to be like the next Trayvon Martin.
Nandi Kane says he was walking home from work when it happened.
I felt like they were going to draw a gun out and shoot me in my back or try to break my arms off or something.
Releasing 3 dash cam videos, Sacramento police promised transparency.
Stop right now. Stop right now before I take you to the ground.
Ignoring the officer's commands, the standoff escalated when Kane took off his jacket.
I don't have nothing. Get down.
And then said this.
You're a real man. You just take your gun away and you can fight me like a real man if that's what you want to do.
It's a disturbing incident. Based on the video, we don't condone this behavior with any of our officers.
Why could you not just comply?
We're much better than that. We hold ourselves to a very high standard.
Naomi Montai shot the video and posted it to social media.
The video tells itself. He did not resist nothing.
In a climate where police are often recorded, their conduct scrutinized.
Hey!
Tonight, this officer is off the street, and the man accused of jaywalking faces no criminal charges. Miguel Almaguer, NBC News, Los Angeles.
So ahead tonight, banning trans fats. New evidence that experts say proves it really does have health benefits ahead of new restrictions that will affect every American. Also, our one-on-one with Oprah Winfrey, the new passion project bringing her back to TV about a woman who changed modern medicine forever. We're back now with important news about trans fats. They're in so many foods we love, but they've been linked to higher risk of cardiovascular disease. Now, a new study out today finds banning trans fats actually keeps people out of the hospital, especially encouraging because new trans fat restrictions will take effect nationwide next year. NBC's Ann Thompson has our Keeping You Healthy report.
The temptation of trans fats, enhancing fried foods, chips, cookies, and cakes, to the delight of consumers and bane of doctors. Empty calories increasing the risk of heart attacks and strokes. Now, proof curbing trans fats improves health. A new study finds 3 years after New York counties banned trans fats, people hospitalized for heart attacks and strokes dropped by more than 6%.
There's no recommended daily allowance for a safe level of trans fat consumption. Studies have shown just a couple of grams of intake can increase your risk for heart attack and stroke.
How do trans fats do that? By raising your bad cholesterol levels and lowering the good, leading to plaque buildup in your arteries that can cause heart attacks and stroke. Cardiovascular disease is responsible for 1/3 of the deaths in the U.S. and costs the nation almost $1 billion a day in lost productivity and healthcare expenses. When New York City banned trans fats in restaurants 10 years ago, critics cried nanny state. Next year, the FDA will follow the city's lead and ban trans fats in processed foods nationwide. Do all these items have trans fats?
And that's the problem. You never know.
NBC News medical correspondent Dr. John Torres says you must read labels, looking for trans fats, also called partially hydrogenated oils.
They can label it 0 trans fats, but they can have up to 1/2 gram of trans fats per serving. A bag of chips, it's going to have 5 to 10 servings in there. And as you know, nobody eats 1 serving of potato chips.
Knowledge to protect your heart and life. Ann Thompson, NBC News, New York.
We are back in a moment with Oprah Winfrey on her return to TV, a new starring role in a true life tale.
And knowing about my mother.
Now to our conversation with Oprah Winfrey, talking about her return to TV with a starring role in a new passion project coming to HBO. The true story of one of the most important women in modern medicine. Oprah opens up to NBC's Kristen Dahlgren.
All I got to say about that is, hallelujah. Finally, somebody wanted to talk about my mama.
Oprah Winfrey plays the daughter of Henrietta Lacks, the woman who transformed modern medicine and had no idea. To this day, many have never heard her name.
I started asking people, do you know, have you ever heard of Henrietta Lacks? Ever heard? No one had.
Something Winfrey is now determined to change.
The significance of what her cells have meant, I think the world needs to know that. And now they will.
Lacks was a young mother of 5 who died of cervical cancer in 1951 at Johns Hopkins, where doctors found her unique and aggressive cancer cells were the first to grow in a lab. Henrietta never gave doctors permission to use her cells, and her family was never told.
We didn't know nothing about nothing.
Like nothing they'd seen before, those cells, shortened to HeLa instead of Henrietta's full name, were used to test the polio vaccine, develop in vitro fertilization, and drugs used to fight cancer, just to name a few. Her daughter Deborah and author Rebecca Skloot finally uncovered the truth. But Deborah died just before Skloot's book was published.
I refuse to cry with you, Kristen, but I could when I think about Deborah, how eager she was to know about her mother and to have this story told.
Henrietta's cells were reproduced in labs around the world, and millions of dollars changed hands.
Becca showed me the papers where he wanted to use her name, but the lawyers didn't want to.
Hopkins made all that money off of our mother.
Hopkins ain't made a dime.
Johns Hopkins says it did not profit. The family got nothing. But for the next generation, there is a new mission now.
You can't help but be proud of what is done. So when you think about that, it's like, okay, something bad happened, but something so much good has come from it.
David Lacks now sits on a board at the National Institutes of Health, helping to decide just what Henrietta's gene sequence is used for.
And I think we ought to think of the Lacks family as some of the greatest philanthropists in medicine of all time.
They speak around the country, urging doctors to never forget the patient behind the Petri dish.
She was a woman. She was Black with limited education, limited finances, and look what she has done for the world.
Rebecca Skloot has set up a foundation for the Lackses and others who've contributed to science without their consent.
If anyone had taken just a few minutes to listen to her and answer her questions, it would have changed the whole story for her family.
A family now taking back its history.
I think what we're trying to say is that her life really mattered.
A legacy, just like Henrietta's cells, living on. Kristen Dahlgren, NBC News, Los Angeles.
An important story to be told. When we come back, the new discount Walmart is offering to online shoppers, though there is one catch. We'll tell you more in a moment.
NBC Nightly News is brought to you by Pacific Life, helping generations of families achieve long-term financial security for over 145 years.
The world's largest retailer, Walmart, is offering a new discount to online shoppers. Just be prepared to leave the convenience of your home to get it. Walmart says it is going to cut prices on thousands of items ordered online if customers agree to pick them up at the closest store. It's Walmart's latest shot at an ongoing retail war with Amazon. And finally tonight, we wanted to acknowledge the passing of Dorothy Mengering. You might know her better simply as Dave's mom. David Letterman's, that is. She became an unlikely celebrity in her 70s, baking pies and even covering the Olympics as a special correspondent on her son's late-night show. The audience loved her, and so did we. And our thoughts are with Dave and the whole Letterman family tonight. Dorothy Mengering was 95 years old. That's going to do it for us on a Wednesday night. I'm Lester Holt. For all of us at NBC News, thank you for watching, and good night.